You simply have to hand it to Matt Damon. Whether he is playing a math prodigy, a top-tier agent, a clever con artist, or a stranded astronaut on a lonely rock, he kills it. Regardless of the character, his performance feels incredibly authentic and grounded. Right now, we are diving deep into the life of Ben Affleck's true brother-in-arms. So how did this average kid from Boston climb to the top of the A-list? Plus, what exactly makes Damon such a massive fan of Brad Pitt? What specific choice by Mark Wahlberg launched Damon's massive winning streak? And how did he nearly walk away with $300 million for just one project? Let's dive in. Back when he started, Matt was just another aspiring actor without any fancy industry ties. He definitely lacked a family pedigree of someone like Robert Downey Jr. or Nicolas Cage. While he lacked a famous uncle, he did have his best friend Ben Affleck nearby. They were both obsessed with films, attending the same high school and joining the theatre program to fantasize about future stardom. That shared ambition eventually led them to an Academy Award win, but that was years away. Initially, the duo just needed to land a few actual roles. His big break arrived with 1988's Mystic Pizza. At 18 years old, he managed to land a part with only 2 sentences of dialogue. He actually brought Affleck along for the casting call, though Ben was rejected. By the following year, Matt appeared in Field of Dreams alongside Kevin Costner. While his first film performed decently, Field of Dreams was a smash, grossing $85 million against a $15 million budget. Costner was the industry's golden boy at the time, basically dominating the global ticket sales. These minor roles helped Matt build some serious momentum, eventually paving the way for his major 1992 milestone. His first massive opportunity almost came via Scent of a Woman starring Al Pacino. As per their routine, both Matt and Ben auditioned for the project. Affleck was dismissed quickly, but Matt survived until the final selection phase against Chris O'Donnell. O'Donnell beat him for that gig and snatched the Robin role in Batman Forever 2. Matt was crushed, later joking that Chris was his career's personal jinx. Naturally, he had zero idea that the Batman sequel would eventually derail Chris's entire trajectory. Eventually, Matt stopped complaining and adopted a more optimistic outlook on fate. Whether he truly believed that in 1992 is unclear, but he still found success with School Ties. Even in that film, he shared the screen with O'Donnell and Brendan Fraser, who also saw his star rise. You can check our Fraser video for more on that. Finally, even Ben managed to secure a spot on the big screen. The critics were highly impressed by the entire ensemble in this Robert Mandel production. This rising tide lifted all boats, landing Damon a lead in the expensive Geronimo, an American legend. However, a few problems were lurking. First off, Kevin Costner's recent success with Dances with Wolves had studios dumping cash into every Western script they could find. Geronimo received a massive $35 million budget, with high hopes for critical acclaim and genre-defining greatness. Enticed by the hype, Matt quit Harvard to join the cast, convinced he wouldn't need a degree after starring in such a masterpiece. Here is the second issue. The movie flopped hard and reviewers labeled it a total snooze fest. Strangely, only the indigenous communities actually seemed to like it. It did snag a technical Oscar nomination for sound, but a $19 million return on a $35 million investment is a disaster. Filmmaker Walter Hill later blamed the failure on the clunky title, wishing he had named it Geronimo's War. He also criticized the advertising strategy. The trailers teased a high-octane warrior story, whereas the film was really a character study of his captors. Once again, the marketing department dropped the ball. That disconnect allegedly caused the box office crash. Consequently, Geronimo failed to be the masterpiece Matt expected, actually stalling his momentum significantly. He was forced back into minor background roles, frequently playing second fiddle to Ben, who was getting way more work at the time. He joined Ben for Chasing Amy and Glory Days, worked with Denzel Washington in Courage Under Fire, and starred in the underperforming Rainmaker. Matt worried that if his luck did not change, he would be working fast food while watching Ben's movies on his break. It was time for a pivot. While still at Harvard, he had drafted the beginnings of Good Will Hunting for a scriptwriting course. What started as a simple class project gradually evolved into a complete, feature-length screenplay. He tweaked the story until acting roles started popping up, making him think he might not need a backup plan after all. He tucked the script away, only dusting it off once his acting prospects hit a major roadblock. Armed with sharp tips from industry legends Rob Reiner and Kevin Smith, Damon jumped back into his draft, bringing his pal Ben into the mix. Their chemistry was so electric that Matt actually walked away from a part in The Quick and the Dead just to keep the momentum alive. Leonardo DiCaprio took that part instead. Once finished, the pair shopped their script around town until Castle Rock bought it for $700,000. The studio heads made a power move, suddenly announcing that Pitt and DiCaprio would lead the film. while the actual creators were told to take their money elsewhere. Ben and Matt stood their ground. They had been extremely vocal from the beginning about wanting to play the main characters themselves. The executives basically gave them a cold shoulder and warned them to find a new buyer immediately, because their rights would vanish within 30 days. Total desperation kicked in. Consequently, the pair started shopping the draft to every single person in the industry. They later admitted they felt like nobody was actually finishing the script. To verify their theory, they played a prank by writing a bizarrely intimate scene between the two male friends to see if any readers would mention it. It turned out that everyone was just skimming, as not a single person pointed out the blatant trap hidden in the middle of the story. A desperate Ben eventually handed the draft to Kevin Smith, who took it directly to Miramax, and that one infamous producer, whose name most people refrained from speaking today. That mogul recognized the movie's hit potential, even if he did question why there was such a strange bedroom scene between the leads. The duo happily deleted the sequence, and just like that, the deal with Miramax was finalized. The boss agreed to let the two friends star, though Ben's suggestion of Kevin Smith as director was shot down by Smith himself, who wanted a veteran filmmaker. They landed on Gus Van Sant, though the producer pushed back on casting Minnie Driver, preferring a more glamorous star like Gwyneth Paltrow. Matt and Ben fought for her, arguing that the role required a down-to-earth girl rather than a supermodel, and they actually won that battle. The film grossed $226 million on a tiny $10 million budget and racked up 9 Academy Award nods. The pair eventually walked away with the trophy for writing. Robin Williams also took home an Oscar, marking a win for a massive star the guys never thought would actually agree to their indie project. True to his nature, Robin joined the cast effortlessly and charmed everyone on set. Hits of that magnitude are rare, but the following years were incredibly prosperous for Matt. Immediately following his big win and the movie's successful run, the young star's career reached a whole new level of fame. Interestingly, Spielberg didn't hire him because of the awards hype. Matt actually secured the role well before his breakout film ever hit the big screen. Steven simply needed a fresh face, who could pass for a typical, wholesome farm boy from the Midwest. The legendary director had no clue this kid was about to become a household name until the buzz for his screenplay started exploding everywhere. Spielberg handled the situation perfectly and went on to earn nearly $500 million with his war epic. The film earned 5 trophies from 11 total nominations. Naturally, after hitting 2 home runs in a row, the young actor had zero intention of taking a break. He immediately filmed a poker drama with Edward Norton that became a massive cult classic, despite a lukewarm theatrical run. Both actors recently mentioned they are down for a sequel. We just need someone to provide the funding for it. By 1999, Matt had committed to 2 more films, starting with the religious satire Dogma. He had actually promised to do that one much earlier when he first met Kevin Smith, who was then just an indie director and comic shop owner. Legend has it that the trio was out drinking when Smith began rambling about his plans for a controversial comedy. After a few drinks, the director decided the 2 friends should play the fallen angels, and they simply agreed on the spot. By the late 90s, they had to honor that barroom deal. They ended up in the movie under terms they probably would have rejected for any other project. To be fair, most of the cast worked for next to nothing simply because they enjoyed working with Kevin. Alan Rickman signed on because he was a fan of Kevin's previous work, while George Carlin seemed genuinely happy to portray a member of the clergy. That is just a guess, but regardless, the $10 million movie did quite well by earning $34 million at the box office. This was quite an achievement considering the massive religious protests that likely hurt the film's total earnings. While that project felt like helping out a buddy, Matt's next role in 1999 was a much more prestigious undertaking. Originally, the director wanted Tom Cruise for the lead. He spent months trying to sign him, but the superstar kept hesitating and never officially committed to the part. Getting impatient, the filmmaker saw Matt's breakout performance and immediately pivoted to sign him instead, convincing the studio they needed his talent. When Tom finally decided he was ready, the role was already gone. To prepare, Matt lost 30 pounds and mastered piano, Italian vocals, and a British dialect. He completely immersed himself in the character, and it paid off. The $40 million film grossed $138 million, giving Matt a massive payday. Just 2 years prior, he had only cleared $300,000 for both writing and starring in his debut hit. Now his salary jumped to $5 million. He seemed destined for the $20 million club until a sudden string of bad luck changed everything. His momentum stalled with a golf movie co-starring Will Smith, followed by back-to-back failures in several other dramatic features. He had only taken one of those roles as a favor to his friend from the old days. Even his animated sci-fi movie failed to find an audience, This slump lasted 2 years and looked career-threatening until a strange twist involving Mark Wahlberg changed his fate. That situation eventually landed Matt 2 huge franchises and a critically acclaimed drama. The whole thing worked out perfectly in the end. Here is the secret. While casting his star-studded heist movie, Steven Soderbergh originally reached out to Mark Wahlberg for a specific role. The part was literally written for him, but before he could sign, Tim Burton offered him the lead in a sci-fi blockbuster. Mark chose The Apes in a heartbeat. Soderbergh didn't waste any time finding a replacement, and everyone knows how that turned out. At the time, Matt was seriously weighing a part in Frank Darabont's film The Majestic. However, when Soderbergh reached out, Damon pivoted toward Ocean's 11. For Mark Wahlberg, both paths were total wins. Adding either Planet of the Apes or Ocean's 11 would have bolstered his career regardless. Yet, for Damon, the stakes of this decision were far more intense. The Majestic eventually starred Jim Carrey, but it tanked at the theaters and effectively derailed Darabont's professional momentum along with it. Meanwhile, Ocean's 11 raked in $450 million against an $85 million budget, netting Damon $5 million. Still, the benefits Matt reaped from Wahlberg's past didn't end there. After their collaboration on Ocean's 11, Brad Pitt was so impressed that he vouched for Matt to produce his Searching for Jason Bourne. Remarkably, Brad passed on the role himself to suggest Damon instead. Because of this, Matt frequently highlights Pitt's character, labeling him a genuine Hollywood icon. Damon admitted he was stunned to be cast as Bourne, considering the literary version was significantly older. Little did he know, the numbers would eventually add up. Thanks to a grueling production, the actor sprouted enough silver hair to bridge that age gap naturally. Shooting the Bourne identity proved to be a massive ordeal from start to finish. The first hurdle was the standard clash between the studio and the director. Universal wanted a James Bond vibe without the Bond name, while director Doug Liman and Damon fought for something fresh. Writers were constantly overhauling the script, and entire sequences were tossed aside. By the finale, executives were even pushing for mopeds equipped with missile launchers. Those previously cut segments remained on the floor, and the rocket launchers were scrapped, but the victory came at a steep price. Between the frayed nerves of Liman and Damon, an $8 million budget spike, and a year-long release delay, the project seemed destined to become a historic disaster. Yet, the Bourne identity thrived, earning $214 million on a $68 million budget. Matt also doubled his earnings to $10 million. For the follow-up, the studio immediately replaced Liman with Paul Greengrass. Universal argued that Greengrass brought a gritty, documentary-style authenticity, and the director definitely leaned into that aesthetic for the film. His use of jittery handheld cameras and rapid-fire editing isn't for everyone. Even Greengrass eventually confessed that he might have pushed the style a bit too far. Rumour has it the test screenings made some viewers motion sick, leading to reshoots where the director and Matt brainstormed a completely new finale. They weren't just doing it for kicks, though. Early audiences found the first ending more confusing than a horror game. Consequently, the team overhauled the climax, and the effort clearly paid off. The Bourne sequel earned $293 million on a $75 million spend, plus Ocean's 12 debuted that same year. With such heavy-hitting franchises in his pocket, Matt could weather a few cinematic duds without blinking. And duds there were, including Stuck on You, Syriana, and The Brothers Grimm, the latter of which really hurt. Despite having Terry Gilliam at the helm, a talented cast, and low production costs in the Czech Republic, the movie failed to reach the break-even point. Nevertheless, his professional standing remained untouched. He even had the freedom to take on goofy cameos, like his appearance in Eurotrip. In that flick, the protagonist gets dumped for a rock star played by Damon. In a weird twist of fate, Matt once lost a girlfriend to the drummer of Metallica in real life. While Matt's trajectory was soaring, his close friend Ben Affleck was hitting some serious turbulence. Damon attempted to throw him a lifeline, specifically with the movie Paycheck. The lead was originally Matt's to take, but he convinced the studio that Ben was the better choice. Thanks to that favour, Affleck ended up starring in yet another box office disaster. A similar scenario played out with Pearl Harbor. Both actors were slated to star, but Damon sensed trouble brewing and walked away. That intuitive move saved him from several Razzie nominations, which Affleck once again stepped up to collect. It wasn't just his best friend that Matt was assisting. The actor also ended up giving a serious boost to several other careers along the way. Damon passed on a Spielberg project, Minority Report, which essentially paved the way for Colin Farrell's big break. Matt also did Heath Ledger a solid by rejecting Brokeback Mountain. He considered the film for a while, but ultimately bailed, allegedly because Ben Affleck wasn't involved. It's not like Damon swapped Brokeback Mountain for some bottom-tier project, however. Quite the opposite. Once more, Brad Pitt handed him a golden opportunity. Brad was the first pick for The Departed, but he felt he was too old and chose Babel instead, pointing the finger at Damon. You likely know what followed. The film grossed $300 million on a $90 million budget and snatched up 4 Oscars, including Best Picture. That triumph completely masked the failure of The Good Shepherd, which Robert De Niro directed. Even with a powerhouse cast, the movie couldn't find its footing, earning $100 million against a $110 million cost. Critics frequently used the word bloated to describe it. Regardless, even without The Departed, Matt was in a secure position. By 2007, both Ocean's 13 and The Bourne Ultimatum were hitting screens. As per usual, the third Bourne film came with its own set of headaches, mostly involving writer Tony Gilroy. Damon claimed Gilroy was too preoccupied with his own directorial debut, Michael Clayton, to give the Bourne script any attention. The star, the director, and the producers were all blowing up Gilroy's phone, but he just went silent and disappeared. By the end, the screenwriter's inbox was stuffed with hundreds of intense messages, some from Damon himself, which the actor praised never see the light of day. We probably shouldn't feel too bad for Tony, though. A fresh team of writers had to scramble to salvage the script, yet Gilroy still walked away with the credit. As usual, the behind-the-scenes chaos didn't hurt the final product. The Bourne Ultimatum grossed nearly $500 million against a $110 million investment, while Damon secured a $20 million salary. Because the third Bourne movie took so long to finish, Matt had to pass on the lead in Hancock, leaving the door wide open for Will Smith. The following years became quite famous for Matt's string of passed-over roles and missed opportunities. He even lost out on a Star Trek part because of his age. The second Damon heard the movie was in development, he reached out to J.J. Abrams to let him know he was available. That was the moment Matt realized he should probably start looking for angry father roles instead. He also famously turned down Avatar himself. Now he views that as a massive blunder, but at the time the project seemed like just another animated flick with big-eyed blue aliens. Today, those blue aliens have raked in nearly $3 billion. Eventually, the realization hit Damon like a ton of bricks. It is hard to quantify how many curse words he shouted that afternoon. If he had just said yes, he would have banked 10% of the total revenue, as James Cameron promised, meaning Matt could have been the wealthiest actor ever, pocketing $300 million. He also walked away from The Dark Knight. Christopher Nolan viewed Matt as the perfect Harvey Dent, but the actor likely had nightmares about Affleck's Daredevil failure and was not looking to repeat that superhero experience. Aaron Eckhart stepped into the role instead, leaving Matt to regret his choice later on. His established franchises were also beginning to lose their momentum. No new Bourne or Ocean's movies were in the works, making his other projects suddenly much more important. Unfortunately, they were nowhere near as profitable as The Departed. Instead of joining the worlds of Avatar or Batman, Damon starred in The Informant, Invictus, Hereafter, and Green Zone. The last one was a total disaster, while the first 3 barely made enough to buy a few bags of chips. Matt's career hit a dry spell, where everything underperformed for 5 straight years. We Bought a Zoo, The Monuments Men, and Contagion were released during that time. They made some money, but it was essentially just pocket change. Take The Adjustment Bureau as an example. It was technically a success, but did not earn enough for the studio to greenlight a sequel. Contagion only became a massive hit later, when the global health crisis began, and everyone rushed to watch it, shouting, "The filmmakers must have had some kind of psychic vision." One particularly brutal failure was Elysium by Neil Blomkamp, a director everyone adored after District 9. Elysium was meant to launch a brand new franchise, but its $286 million gross on a $115 million budget killed any chance of a sequel. His only genuine highlight during those 5 years was the Coen brothers' western True Grit. However, the critics seemed to praise every actor except for him. It felt like the universe was sending Matt a very blunt message that he had lost his way. To be fair, the actor finally got the hint. Damon showed he was back on track in the most straightforward way possible by finally saying yes to Christopher Nolan. Most people probably recall those 2 years Matt Damon spent playing a lonely man on desolate planets. His first time playing a space survivor was in Interstellar when Nolan brought him on. He did not have the lead role, but it was certainly memorable. Plus, the movie earned $759 million against a $165 million budget. Witnessing that massive success, Sir Ridley Scott decided to cast Matt for a nearly identical role in The Martian. When Matt pointed out that he had just played a similar character, the director told him that nobody gave a damn. They finished the shoot in just 5 weeks. First, they filmed all of Damon's solo work, which was basically the entire movie. Within a week, everything else was wrapped, and it went on to earn $631 million Matt walked away with $15 million for just 5 weeks of filming and an Oscar nomination, completely revitalizing his career. Immediately after that came the new Jason Bourne, where Matt supposedly earned $1 million for every one of his 25 lines. However, this production was not nearly as smooth as his time on Mars. They spent 5 weeks just on the Vegas scenes, and one car chase took an entire month and wrecked 100 vehicles. Jason Bourne was a financial success at the box office, but Matt was deeply dissatisfied with the final product. He did not blame the director, Paul Greengrass, but rather the studio for rushing the process and delivering a terrible script. As a result, they were filming based on rough drafts and random notes, and it showed. Out of the entire series, this installment received the worst reviews. Because of that experience, Damon refused to do another sequel for a long time. In 2016, he did a Chinese film called The Great Wall, and then hit another string of failures. Downsizing and Suburbicon both flopped hard. Unsane by Steven Soderbergh only made $14 million, which looks like a failure, but since it cost almost nothing, it actually worked out. Financially, it was a win, even if no one noticed. Still, Damon managed to enter the recent era on a high note with Ford vs. Ferrari alongside Christian Bale. It did not exactly shatter records, earning $226 million on a $98 million budget, but it earned immense respect from critics. During the lockdown, Matt stayed busy by reuniting with Ben Affleck to write the screenplay for Ridley Scott's The Last Duel. Critics and fans mostly enjoyed the film, with the exception of Affleck, who managed to snag another Razzie nomination. No one was really surprised by that. The real shock came from the financial numbers. The movie only made $31 million on a $100 million budget. It was a complete disaster. That same year, Stillwater also failed to find an audience, and the losing streak continued into 2023 with the movie Air. This was another collaboration with Affleck, but this time it was their first major project for their own company, Artist Equity and Amazon. Air was the first Amazon project to get a big theatrical release, and it flopped despite great reviews. Matt shielded himself from these failures by joining Nolan's Oppenheimer. Ironically, Damon had promised his wife he would take a break from acting unless Nolan called him up. Naturally, that is exactly what happened. Oppenheimer earned nearly $1 billion on a $100 million budget and won 7 Oscars. It seems the pandemic brought Damon and Affleck even closer together. Or perhaps after all his personal drama, Ben just finds comfort in his lifelong friend. Either way, this iconic duo is back in action. Their recent project for Apple TV, The Instigators, and the upcoming Animals on Netflix are both results of their joint venture. Since these are streaming movies, box office flops are not really a concern, which is a smart move when casting Affleck. But it is not all about Ben. Right now, Damon is working on Nolan's The Odyssey, and a new Jason Bourne film is also in development. Matt avoided the franchise for a decade. They even made a movie without him, but he finally decided to return to the role. Rumors suggest the new film is called The Bourne Dilemma, and will be directed by Edward Berger, the man behind All Quiet on the Western Front. These reports seem likely, but the internet will definitely correct me if they are wrong. With a revived franchise and his own studio, he is set. Life is treating him great these days. Truly fantastic. While he might not be the first Hollywood titan you mention, Matt Damon is a total legend. Folks usually bring up Brad Pitt or Leo first. In reality though, Damon is easily their equal and keeps a spotless reputation. Filmmakers adore him, colleagues respect him, and the public appreciates that he chose a down-to-earth wife instead of a starlet. The nastiest thing South Park could find to mock was his accidental promotion of a shady crypto platform. Remember him claiming that luck smiles on the daring? My old man joked about going broke following the guy's advice. If that is his biggest scandal, then he's essentially the American version of Henry Cavill. He has no drama and is globally adored. We actually did a feature on Henry as well, so give that a look. Thanks for the support, hit subscribe, and catch you later.